They said my house was strategically positioned for educational expansion. I said it was my home. My father died building that porch. My mother's ashes were buried under the oak tree out front. And now they wanted to bulldoze it for a better bus route. That was the day I realized how quickly your life can be redrawn by someone else's pen. One city council meeting, one motion passed. And suddenly a red line cut across my property on a map I'd never seen before. Proposed rezoning for District 12 Elementary expansion. I remember the words perfectly because they were printed on the notice nailed to my front door like a scarlet letter. I wasn't supposed to find out that way. The letter came late intentionally, I suspect. A quiet bureaucratic trick so I'd miss the appeal deadline. But I didn't. I was sweeping the porch when the city worker, a man with a half-buttoned shirt and a look that said he hated confrontation, stapled it into the wood. He didn't meet my eyes when he left. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, with the notice in one hand and my father's old thermos in the other, still smelling faintly of coffee and machine oil. I read every word, then read it again. Rezoning pending approval, public hearing, compensation, subject to fair market value. I laughed bitterly. Fair to whom? Not to me. My neighbor, Donna, came over later that evening. I heard, she said softly, setting down a casserole I didn't touch. You know they've been planning this since last summer? The superintendent wants a direct road from the new middle school to the elementary. They say it's for safety, less traffic through town. Safety, I muttered. That's the word they use when they want you to agree before you realize what you're giving up. Donna nodded. They've already bought out the bakers to blocks down. The city offered them double market value. They took it. I won't, I said. I didn't even think about it. My house was more than lumber, and shingles it was legacy. My father built it himself, every beam cut by hand. My mother painted the walls the color of her wedding dress. And me? I learned to walk across those uneven floorboards, learn to speak in the echo of that long hallway. You don't sell history. The next morning, I drove to City Hall. The receptionist smiled that tired, trained smile people wear when they know bad news is coming. Rezoning petitions are handled on the second floor, room 204. You'll need Form RZ11, she said without looking up. Room 200 for smelled like dry coffee and resentment. Behind the counter sat a young man in a plaid shirt, his name tag reading asterisk Tyler H asterisk. He was scrolling through his phone until he noticed me. Can I help you? Yes, I said. You can start by explaining why my house is being stolen. He blinked, clearly not used to that kind of directness. Ma'am, no one's stealing anything. The city's exercising. It's right under the Zoning Adjustment Act. You'll be compensated fairly. Fairly, I repeated. Tell me, Tyler, do you own a house? He hesitated. No, ma'am. Then don't talk to me about fairness. He shifted uncomfortably. Have the right to file a petition to oppose the rezoning, but I'll be honest, it rarely works. Once a proposal gets this far, it's usually a done deal. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. Then I'll be the exception. He sighed and handed me a thin packet of papers. You'll need signatures at least 50 from residents within the same zoning area, and you'll have to submit before next Tuesday. After that, it goes to the Planning Commission. I walked out with the packet pressed against my chest like a declaration of war. By sunset, I had already knocked on 10 doors. Most people listened politely, signed without question. Some regarded me at least. But there was one conversation I'll never forget. Old Mr. Jenkins, who lived across from the creek. Don't waste your breath, he told me, his voice gravelly from years of smoking. You think they care about us? They made up their minds months ago. The school's already in the budget. Budgets can be changed, I said. Not when the contracts are signed. I paused. Contracts, he nodded slowly. My nephew works for the construction firm. Said they already surveyed your lot. The words hit harder than I expected. They hadn't even approved the rezoning yet, and already they were drawing blueprints. It wasn't about process, it was about power. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, staring at the flicker of headlights passing through the curtains. Every sound Felt amplified the hum of the refrigerator, the groan of the floorboards, the whisper of wind through the old oak tree. My parents had built this place with their bare hands. I couldn't let it vanish beneath asphalt and excuses. The next day, I made a plan. I'd get the signatures, yes, but I'd also dig. Public records, budget, allocations, land acquisition, documents, anything that could expose the truth. I wasn't just fighting for sentiment anymore. I was fighting against the quiet machinery that eats up small people like me. At the county records office, I found what I was looking for, an addendum to the school district's development plan dated 3 months earlier. The contractor's name was highlighted in bold. Asterisk Eldridge and Sons Construction asterisk. Next to it, a familiar signature councilman, Jeffries. Head of the zoning committee, Jeffries, the same man who shook my hand at the fall festival last year, telling me he admired how I kept the old neighborhood spirit alive. I made a copy of the document and drove straight to the local paper. The editor, a woman named Lilla with glasses too large for her face, listened carefully as I laid out everything. You realize, she said finally, if you're wrong, this could backfire. They'll call it obstruction. I'm not wrong, I said. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Leave the documents with me. I'll look into it. That night, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Mrs. Adler? A man asked. Yes, this is Councilman Jeffries. I understand you've been making inquiries about the rezoning. I have, he exhaled. I'd like to suggest you reconsider your opposition. The district's expansion is inevitable. It would be easier for everyone if you cooperated. Easier. For who? He didn't answer immediately. There are incentives for compliance. I'm sure we can make it worth your while. I laughed. You count by what doesn't belong to you. Think about it, he said, and hung up. I sat there in the dark, the hum of the phone still echoing in my ear. They weren't used to resistance, but I was just getting started. By morning, the local paper had called. We're running the story, Leela said. The public deserves to know what's happening, and that's when the real war began. 3 days after the article hit the front page, the whole town was whispering my name like it was a curse or a prayer. Asterisk the woman, fighting the school board. Asterisk some said I was brave, others said I was reckless. The city called me disruptive. But the truth was, I didn't care anymore about how I looked, I cared about what was right. The headline read, Asterisk Council S School Rezoning raises questions of premature land deals. Asterisk. Below, it was a photograph of me standing in front of my house, arms crossed, the oak tree stretching high behind me like an old sentinel. Leela had captured me perfectly defiant, tired, but unbroken. Within 24 hours, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, reporters, anonymous numbers. Some offered support, some offered warnings. Mrs. Adler, one voice said, a man, stern, probably middle-aged. You've made powerful enemies. You don't want to keep pushing this. I hung up. Another call came from a mother in the next district. I saw your story, she said softly. They took my plan de lecture for away action, but they built a private road for developers instead. Don't let them bully you. Her voice trembled, and I realized how many people had simply given up because they believed they couldn't win. That realization lit something inside me, something fierce and stubborn. By the end of that week, I had 76 signatures. Enough to file the petition. I walked into City Hall again, this time with a folder so thick it barely closed. Tyler was there, avoiding my eyes as I handed him the papers. You're really doing this, he murmured. I said I would. He nodded, pressing his lips together. You know, you might actually have a shot. People are talking. Jeffries has been real quiet since the article dropped. Then maybe he's thinking for once, I said, and left before he could respond. That evening, I was sitting on the porch when a black SUV slowed in front of my house. The windows were tinted, the engine humming low. It didn't move for a while. I felt a flicker of Ennie's crawl up my spine. Finally, it drove off, but not before I saw the glint of a camera flash from the passenger side. I slept with the lights on that night. The following morning, 2 men in suits showed up. They introduced themselves as representatives from the school district. One of them, tall and smooth-voiced, handed me a folder. Mrs. Adler, we'd like to offer a new proposal. The district board is willing to increase the compensation package to 220% of market value. That's nearly $500,000. I stared at him. You think this is about money? He smiled thinly. Everything's about money. Then you don't understand people, I said. And you don't understand me, he sighed. This is the last offer before the final vote. I'd hate for this to turn ugly. Ugly, I repeated. You've already nailed the notice to my door, lied about deadlines, tried to intimidate me, and called in your friends at the paper. I think we passed ugly a while ago. His partner shifted uneasily, but the tall one just smirked. We'll see you at the hearing. When they left, I sat in silence, staring out at the road. I could hear children playing, somewhere in the distance, their laughter carried by the wind. That sound the one they claimed to be expanding the district for was the very reason I couldn't give up. They said it was for the kids, but kids don't need concrete and parking lots. They need roads. They need people who don't fold when the world tells them to. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. I prepared like it was a court case. I printed every document, highlighted every inconsistency. I rehearsed my statement in the mirror until my voice no longer shook. When the day came, the council chamber was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Residents filled every seat, some standing along the sides. I spotted Donna, Mr. Jenkins, and even Tyler leaning quietly near the door. Councilman Jeffries, the same man who shook my hand at the fall festival last year, telling me he admired how I kept the old neighborhood spirit alive. I made a copy of the document and drove straight to the local paper. The editor, a woman named Leela with glasses too large for her face, listened carefully as I laid out everything. You realize, she said finally, if you're wrong, this could backfire. They'll call it obstruction. I'm not wrong, I said. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Leave the documents with me. I'll look into it. That night, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Mrs. Adler? A man asked. Yes, this is Councilman Jeffries. I understand you've been making inquiries about the rezoning. I have. He exhaled. I'd like to suggest you reconsider your opposition. The district's expansion is inevitable. It would be easier for everyone if you cooperated. Easier for who? He didn't answer immediately. There are incentives for compliance. I'm sure we can make it worth your while. I laughed. You can't buy what doesn't belong to you. Think about it, he said, and hung up. Premier sa terre. In the dark, the hum of the phone still echoing in my ear. They weren't used to resistance. But I was just getting started. By morning, the local paper had called. We're running the story, Leela said. The public deserves to know what's happening, and that's when the real war began. 3 days after the article hit the front page, the whole town was whispering my name. Like it was a curse or a prayer. Asterisk the woman fighting the school board. Asterisk some said I was brave. Others said I was reckless. The city called me disruptive. But the truth was I didn't care anymore about how I looked. I cared about what was right. The headline read, Asterisk Council's school rezoning raises questions of premature land deals. Asterisk. Below, it was a photograph of me standing in front of my house, arms crossed, the oak tree stretching high behind me like an old sentinel. Leela had captured me perfectly, defiant, tired, but unbroken. We'd end 24 hours when anonymous number. Some offered support, some offered warnings. Mrs. Adler, one voice said a man, stern, probably middle-aged. You've mad. Powerful enemies. You don't want to keep pushing this. I hung up. Another call came from a mother in the next district. I saw your story, she said softly. They termas land last year, this Friday, but they built a private road for developers instead. Don't let them bully you. Her voice trembled, and I realized how many people had simply given up because they believed they couldn't win. That realization lit something inside me. Something fierce and stubborn. By the end of that week, I had 76 signatures, enough to file the petition. I walked into City Hall again, this time with a folder, so thick it barely closed. Tyler was there, avoiding my eyes as I handed him the papers. You're really doing this, he murmured. I said I would. He nodded, pressing his lips together. You know, you Might actually have a shot. People are talking. Jeffries has been real quiet since the article dropped. Then maybe he's thinking for once, I said, and left before he could respond. That evening, I was sitting on the porch when a black SUV slowed in front of my house. The windows were tinted, the engine humming low. It didn't move for a while. I felt a flicker of Ennis crawl up my spine. Finally, it drove off, but not before I saw the glint of a camera flash from the passenger side. I slept with the lights on that night. The following morning, 2 men in suits showed up. They introduced themselves as representatives from the school district. One of them, tall and smooth-voiced, handed me a folder. Mrs. Adler, we'd like to offer a new proposal. The district board is willing to increase the compensation package to 220% of market value. That's nearly $500,000. I stared at him. You think this is about money? He smiled thinly. Everything's about money. Then you don't understand people, I said. And you don't understand me, he sighed. This is the last offer before the final vote. I'd hate for this to turn ugly. Ugly? Premier. Repeated. You've already nailed the notice. To my door, lied about deadlines, tried to intimidate me, and called in your friends at the paper. I think we passed ugly a while ago. His partner shifted uneasily, but the tall one just smirked. We'll see you at the hearing. When they left, I sat in silence, staring out at the road. I could hear children playing, somewhere in the distance, their laughter carried by the wind. That sound, the one they claimed to be expanding the District 4, was the very reason I couldn't give up. They said it was for the kids, but kids don't need concrete and parking lots. They need roots. They need people who don't fold when the world tells them to. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. I prepared like it was a court case. I printed every document, highlighted every inconsistency. I rehearsed my statement in the mirror until my voice no longer shook. When the day came, the council chamber was packed. Jeffries sat in the center, expression carved from stone. Mrs. Adler, he said as I approached the microphone, you've been given 5 minutes. I won't need more than that, I replied. The first thing I did was hold up a copy of the development addendum, the one bearing his signature. This, I said, my voice steady, is a contract dated 3 months before the public was informed of the rezoning proposal. It authorizes preliminary survey work by Eldridge and Sons Construction on property not yet approved for development specifically. Mine, a murmur rippled through the audience. Jeffrey's jaw tightened. Now, according to Section 4 of the Zoning Procedure Code, no construction or related activity may begin without prior notice to affected property owners. That law was ignored. I laid another document on the podium. This is my proof. Signed and dated. Jeffries cleared his throat. Mrs. Adler, these are standard preliminary measures. No, I interrupted. Hey, not. They're illegal. Leela was there, scribbling furiously in her notepad. Cameras clicked. I continued, outlining the timeline, and a faint hum like distant machinery. I changed my number twice, but somehow they kept finding me. One night, I finally picked up and said, if you're going to threaten me, have the guts to use your voice. A pause. Then, a man's chuckle low, quiet, deliberate. You should have taken the money, Mrs. Adler. The line went dead. I stood there, les hand, je silencine. The room suddenly suffocating. I felt the weight of the oak's shadow stretch across the window like a dark sentinel, but that night, even it felt uneasy. The next morning, I drove to the police station. The officer at the front desk took my report with the same disinterested expression people reserve for pothole complaints. Without a number or a plate, there's not much we can do, he said, tapping the form, so someone can stalk me, threaten me, and all you can do is file paperwork. He shrugged. We'll make a note of it. Let us know if anything escalates. Asterisk, the word tasted like iron in my mouth. I returned home, feeling more alone than ever. Every sound in the house felt louder, now the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, even the whisper of wind. Through the oak leaves, I began to dread sunset. Days passed like that, sleepless, tense, waiting for something I couldn't name. Then, one evening, I came home from the grocery store and found my mailbox hanging open. Inside, a single envelope. No stamp, no return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a single photo of my house, taken from across the street. And on the back, written in block letters, "You can't rezone the past." I froze. The photo wasn't from a distance. Et toi ressens, maybe judging by the light. Someone had been standing right outside my home, close enough to see through the front window. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a flashlight and my father's old hunting rifle across my lap. The truck didn't come, but the next morning, tire marks carved deep into the dirt shoulder told me it had been there. I decided I needed help. Not from the police, not from the council, but from someone who could understand what I was dealing with. I called Leela. She arrived that afternoon, camera slung over her shoulder, notebook in hand. I showed her the photo and the note. She frowned deeply. "This isn't just intimidation anymore. This is personal. I thought once the vote was over, it'd be done." I said quietly. "People don't like being embarrassed," she replied, "especially powerful ones. I'll dig around, see if Jeffries or Eldridge has been moving funds, hiring private contractors. Maybe someone's trying to settle a score." True to her word, Leila called 2 days later. "You might want to sit down for this," she said. "The district filed a new proposal. Smaller, scale technically, outside your property lines, but it cuts into the creek that runs behind your land. If it passes, it'll affect your drainage, your boundaries basically. They'll strangle your lot 1 inch at a time." I closed my eyes. So they couldn't take my house, so now they'll just make it unlivable. "Looks that way," she said grimly. "And guess who's backing the new plan? Eldridge. They're using a different shell company this time, Hearthline Development. Same signatures, same funding source." I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "They think they can outmaneuver me with paperwork. Fine, if they want to play dirty. I'll dig deeper than they ever dreamed." That night, I pulled every document, every record I'd collected over the month's rezoning forms, hearing transcripts, property map. I spread them across the living room floor like a battlefield. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for the principle that the small and stubborn could still stand against the machine. I started making calls too. Environmental consultants, local activists, even a retired city attorney named Walt, who'd fought similar cases years ago. He agreed to meet the next morning. Walt Watalin, we met at a diner off Route 14, where the coffee was weak, but the privacy decent. Everything. Occasionally scrib a napkinkin. Elined Bach, stroking sheet. "Classic zoning creep," he said. "They lose a big proposal, so they come back with a minor adjustment, something small enough to dodge. Public outrage, but large enough to achieve the same result over time. So what do? Find the environmental angle," he said. "If that creek's part of a watershed, they can't touch it without a federal permit. Get proof, and you'll have leverage. Mortantatiola, where's the archives? Look for the water rights documentation, and Mrs. Adler." He met my eyes. "Be careful. When money's on the line, people stop playing fair." I drove straight to the archives. Hours passed in that dusty room, sifting through records that smelled of mildew and ink. Antenne Premier. Found it an old topographic map from the 70s. Clearly labeling the creek as a protected tributary of the Clearwater watershed. It was there, in black and white. I stared at the map, heart racing. That single piece of paper could dismantle their entire new proposal. As I left the building, clutching the copy, I saw a familiar black SUV parked down the block. This time, the engine was running. The driver's window rolled down just enough for me to see the glint of sunglasses. Then, the car eased forward slow. Deliberate hand turned the corner. For a long moment, I stood frozen on the steps, the map trembling in my hands. They knew I had found something that could ruin them. And suddenly, the battle over. My house didn't feel like a local zoning dispute anymore. It felt like war. That night, the air felt heavier than usual, thick, like the world was holding its breath. The cicadas were silent. Even the oak tree seemed still, its branches motionless under a pale, swollen moon. I sat in the living room with every light on, the map spread across the table, like a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I had made copies, hidden one under a loose floorboard in the hallway. Another corner of Seabird, Falting lost on me. Around midnight, the hum of an engine drifted through the open window. I froze. Slowly, I peeked through the curtain. The black SUV was back, headlights off, just sitting at the end of the driveway. My hand tightened around the phone. But I didn't call anyone. I knew how that would go. The police would show up an hour later, find nothing, and tell me to stay vigilant. So I waited. Minutes passed. The SUV idled, then reversed quietly, disappearing down the road. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. Next morning, Première Calais Doualtive taught me to spot next part of watershed. They can't touch it. He let out a low whistle. That's gold. File an injunction before they can act. I'll help you draft it. Would it stop them? He hesitated. It'll stop them legally. But if they're playing the game this dirty already, don't expect them to go quietly. He wasn't wrong. By noon, I had emailed copies of the map to Leila and to environmental advocacy groups. If anything happened to me, I wanted the evidence scattered like seeds. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. But later that day, as I was walking back from the mailbox, I noticed something. Strange, the latch on my back gate was broken. Twisted, the metal bent outward. Someone had been there, inside the fence line. I went inside and checked the house. Nothing missing, no signs of forced entry. But when I stepped into the backyard, my stomach turned. The oak tree. There was a mark carved into the trunk a deep, forming a crude X, raw wood showing through the bark. It hadn't been there before. Et toi? Un message. That night, I couldn't bring myself to turn the lights off. Every sound, every creak, every shift of wine made my pulse race. Around 2 a.m., I heard something again. Not an engine this time. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching over gravel outside the porch. I grabbed the rifle, heart hammering, and shouted, I'm armed. Silence. Then, from the dark, someone laughed. Soft, breathy, close enough to make my skin crawl. I pulled the curtains aside just in time to see a shadow retreat beyond the oak tree. My porch light caught the glint of metal. In his hand, maybe a phone, maybe a knife, I couldn't tell. The next morning, I found fresh cigarette butt steps, Triumph M lined calling card. Wen lila. Cambi la te chukwanke. Mian said, you look like hell. They were here again. I whispered. They were asterisk right there. Asterisk, she glanced toward the yard. We need to make this public again. I'll publish everything. The threats, the photos, the environmental documents. If they want a war, we'll drag them into daylight. Do it, I said. But don't use my address this time. I don't want you getting dragged into it. She smiled faintly. Honey, I'm already dragged. By the next morning, her article was everywhere, rezoning retaliation. Resident faces harassment after exposing school land deal. Asterisk asterisk the story spread fast, picked up by regional outlets, even a few national blogs. Support poured in online, strangers offering help, legal aid, or just words of encouragement. But attention cuts both ways. 2 days later, someone threw a rock through my front window. It landed on the floor near the kitchen table, wrapped in a crumpled note. The handwriting was jagged, all caps. Asterisk asterisk stop digging or we'll bury you. Asterisk asterisk that was the first time I truly felt fear, not anger, not defiance, but raw fear. The kind that lives in your bones. I went to stay at Donna's for the night. She made me tea, trying to calm my shaking hands. You can't stay there alone anymore, she said. I'm not leaving my house, I murmured. That's what they want. Then you need protection. From who? Alftistown in someone's night. The injunction's filed, he said. They can't move forward without environmental clearance. You've got them. Cornered. I wish that made me feel better, I said. It should. They're getting desperate. That's good. It means they're losing. But desperation makes people dangerous. The following week, I noticed the truck again. Not parked this time, driving slowly down my street, windows tinted, matching my pace as I walked the sidewalk. It stopped when I stopped, moved when I did. I turned the corner. Quickly, cutting through a neighbor's yard, heart racing. When I came out on the next block, the truck was gone. That night, I decided to install cameras. Not the cheap kind, but a full set-up front porch, backyard, even one aimed at the oak tree. If they wanted to play games, I'd record every move. It was a mistake to think cameras would make me feel safer. They didn't, because the next morning, when I checked the footage, the timestamp read 3:12 a.m. and on the screen, Clear as day, a man stood at the base of the oak, tree face hidden by a hood, motionless, just staring up at my house. He stayed there for 7 full minutes. Then he looked directly at the camera and smiled. The footage cut to static. My hands went numb. I replayed it 3 times, hoping it was a glitch, a trick of light. It wasn't. They wanted me scared. And I was. But fear and fury are close cousins. I picked up the phone and called Walt. Again, it's time to push harder, I said. We're not just fighting zoning corruption anymore. We're dealing with intimidation, trespassing, harassment. I want to drag every name attached to that company into the light. Walt's voice was calm, steady. Then we'll do it. But understand something. Mrs. Adler, once we file this as a criminal matter, they'll come at you harder than ever. I looked out the window toward the oak tree, the wound on its trunk, still raw and bright under the morning sun. Let them come, I said quietly. I'm not moving, but as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just drawn a line I could never step back from. And somewhere out there, behind the tinted glass of that black SUV, someone was smiling because the real fight had only just begun. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of my own house breathing. That's the only way I can describe it, the faint, living creak of the floorboards, the shifting sigh of old wood in the dark. I knew every sound this house. Madith. I'd grown up with them, memorized them, but this sound was wrong. It wasn't the house, someone was inside. I reached for the rifle before I even turned on the light. My pulse was so loud it filled my ears. I listened, their soft footsteps, deliberate, coming from the kitchen. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They were looking for something. I crept down the hall barefoot, heart pounding so violently I thought it might give me away. The kitchen door was half open. Through the gap I saw the faint shimmer of a flashlight beam sweeping across the counters, the table, the floor, and then I saw him. A man tall, wearing a dark jacket, hood up. His movements were calm, methodical, like he knew exactly where he was going. He opened drawers, pulled papers from the counter. He was searching for the map. I tightened my grip on the rifle, thumb brushing against the safety. My hands were trembling. One sound, one wrong breath, and he'd turn. Then a sound broke the silence. The floorboard under my heel groaned long and slow. The man froze for a moment. Neither of us moved. The flashlight beam hung motionless in the air. Then he turned toward me, and for the briefest instant, the light caught his face. Pale skin, cold eyes, the kind that never looked surprised. I didn't think. I shouted, "Get out of my house." He bolted toward the back door faster than I could react. The door slammed open, the screen tearing loose, and by the time I reached the porch, he was already sprinting across the yard, vanishing into the darkness beyond the oak tree. The silence that followed was unbearable when I finally managed to call the police. They arrived 40 minutes later, 2 officers, young, uncertain, standing in my kitchen with their flashlights and clipboards. Did he take anything? One of them asked. I don't know. Yet I said, voice shaking. He was looking through my papers. The other officer shined his light on the floor. No signs of forced entry. Are you sure you didn't forget to lock up? I stared at him. He was inside my house. You think I imagined it? He raised a placating hand. We're not saying that, ma'am. We'll file a report, have a car patrol the area. Tonight, probably just a break-in attempt. Probably, but that was all they said. After they left, I sat on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of drawers and scattered papers. I found one thing, missing the original copy of the map. The one I'd kept in the kitchen drawer. I still had the others, the one under the floorboard, the one hidden in To Kill a Mockingbird. But the fact that they knew where to look chilled me to the bone. Someone had told them. The next morning, Layla called. Her voice was tight. I heard about the break-in. Are you okay? I'm fine. I lied. They took the map, didn't they? Yes. A pause. Then they're escalating. I've been getting strange emails to no sender name, no subject line, just attachments. I won't open. They know. I'm still digging. Stop, I said, immediately. You've done enough. You don't owe me this. Don't you dare say that. She snapped. This isn't about one house anymore. It's about a system that thinks it can erase people. You're just the one brave or stubborn enough to make them bleed for it. Her voice cracked on that last word, and I realized she was scared too. That afternoon, Walt came by in person. He stood in my living room, looking around the mess. Jaw tight. They're trying to break you, he said quietly. Physically, mentally, any way they can, but we've got what we need. He pulled out a folder. Here, preliminary ruling from the County Environmental Board. They've officially placed the creek under federal protection. Eldridge and their fake front crush sheets overall. Yes, they can't develop without risking federal penalties, but even as he said it, something in his Eyes told me it wasn't over. Not really that night I went. Spotlight came something else. That night, my power went out. The entire neighborhood still glowed, every house but mine. And from the darkness outside, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires rolling slowly over gravel. The black SUV had returned. Only this time, it didn't stop at the end of the driveway. It John Edin, and came straight toward my house. The beams of the SUV's headlights slashed across my walls, filling the windows with white fire. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I didn't. I couldn't. This was my house. My family's bones were in its walls. I stood in the hallway, reflinant, and listened beyond the porch. Just for a moment, nothing happened. The air hung still and heavy. Then, the sound of a car door opening slow, deliberate, metal against metal. Footsteps followed. One pair. Boots. Heavy. I took a breath so deep it scraped my throat and flicked the porch light on, manually the backup one connected to a separate fuse. The bulb flickered to life, dim but steady. Je poursuis. Empty. I stepped closer to the window, eyes straining against the glare. The SUV sat there, driver's side door wide open, engine still running. But no one was inside. The silence was worse than any threat. I backed away slowly, keeping the rifle leveled at the door, and then 3 sharp knocks. From inside the house. The sound came from the back hallway, the one that led toward the kitchen. I froze, staring toward the darkness that pooled at the end of the corridor. The front door was still locked, the back door. I hadn't checked since the break-in. I swallowed hard, stepping backward until my shoulder touched the wall. Who's there? No answer. Whoever you are, you picked the wrong damn house. Still nothing. Just a faint sound, like fabric brushing against wood. I raised the rifle and crept down the hallway. The floor creaked under my steps, and every sound echoed through the house like thunder. When I reached the kitchen doorway, I stopped. The back door was ajar just a few inches, but enough for the wind to toy with it. I kicked it shut hard. And from outside, I heard it a muffled laugh. Then, the crunch of boots retreating into the night. By the time the police arrived again, the SUV was gone. They took another statement, promised another patrol. But I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. Not really. After they left, I locked every door and window, dragged a chair under the knob, and sat by the window until dawn. When the first light crept over the horizon, I went outside. Tire tracks still scarred the driveway, deep and deliberate, leading straight to the porch and then away again. But at 20 at moon. There was something hanging from the oak tree. A small wooden sign nailed into the bark just below the X for words. Burned into the surface with a heated brand. Every house falls. The letters were jagged, uneven like they'd been carved in anger. I stood there for